I had just bought the house, 2 months in, still smelled like fresh paint, and every neighbor I'd met so far had been either friendly or too wrapped up in golf cart drama to care what I did, except Karen. It didn't take long. One Monday morning, I walked out to find a bright orange sticker slapped across the side of my work truck's window like some kind of neon warning label. Violation. Unauthorized commercial vehicle. It looked like something a bouncer would put on a fake ID. I peeled it off and found a fine beneath it. $75, with the reason listed as in violation of HOA Covenant 4B. No visible commercial vehicles may be parked in driveways overnight. The rule was dated literally. It had been written in 1985, when the average work truck probably had wood paneling and a CB radio. My Ford F-350 was less of a truck and more of a mobile command center, equipped for emergency plumbing calls across Florida. The decals were professional, the tires were spotless, and the whole thing looked cleaner than Karen's Lexus. I thought it was a mistake, maybe a formality, so I called the HOA office. Big mistake. The voice on the other end sounded like a martini-soaked hyena with a Bluetooth headset. This is Karen, head of the HOA Compliance Board. You must be the new neighbor with the vulgar plumbing advertisement on his vehicle. I chuckled. It's just my logo. It says, Florida's #1 emergency plumber. She sniffed through the phone. Exactly. #1 or not, work trucks belong in garages, not driveways where decent people can see them. I explained that my truck doesn't fit in my garage. I use it for 24/7 emergency services. Lives have literally depended on how quickly I can respond. She paused, and I could hear her tapping her fingernails against something hard. Probably the HOA rulebook she keeps under her pillow. That sounds like a personal problem, not a community one. The line went dead. The next morning, there were 2 more citations. One for the truck. One for failure to comply with HOA decorum. I had no idea what that even meant. By the end of the week, Karen had clearly activated full petty patrol mode. She began strolling past my house with a clipboard at 6 a.m., peering at my front yard like it was a crime scene. She knocked once to inform me my front doormat, which said, "Flush problems. I fix 'em," was crude and unsightly. I offered her a free estimate on the pipe that must have burst in her brain. She was not amused. That Saturday, I got an envelope hand-delivered by a man who looked like he hated his job. It was a formal notice of a mandatory HOA hearing to determine if my habitual violations merited fines, further legal action, or removal of said vehicle. Karen was playing chess with rules written before the internet, and I was just trying to get to my next clogged toilet emergency. Then came the kicker. Karen showed up at my client's house. I was elbow-deep in a busted sewer line when she pulled up, stepped out in kitten heels, and took photos of me and the truck on private property. My client, a retired judge, stepped out and said, "Ma'am, this is private land. Leave or I'll call the sheriff." Karen turned red, but not from embarrassment. More like a clogged rage vein. "I'm documenting for the HOA." The judge folded his arms. "The HOA doesn't extend here, sweetheart." She left, but I knew something had shifted. She wasn't just annoyed anymore. She was threatened. I'd embarrassed her. I'd outranked her invisible suburban badge. And she wasn't about to let that go. Back home, I noticed something new. A folded pamphlet stuffed in my mailbox. A list of HOA rules, highlighted aggressively in pink. The note scribbled inside, "Since you don't seem to care about our standards, perhaps you'll respond better in writing. Regards, Karen." That night I cracked a beer, flipped through the absurd rulebook, and found one gem: no livestock allowed unless temporarily for educational presentations. Another: no wind chimes exceeding 65 decibels. These people had measured wind chimes. But nowhere did it say I couldn't operate an emergency vehicle vital to health and safety. That's when I knew. Karen didn't care about rules. She cared about control. She wanted a war. She was about to get one. But first, I needed to dig into Karen's past, her HOA rulebook, and a little thing called Florida Municipal Code. 3 days after the bogus citation hearing notice, I came home to find my driveway empty. Not, my kid took the truck empty. More like, tow truck just committed grand theft empty. At first, I thought maybe one of my techs had come by to swap rigs. We sometimes rotated trucks for certain jobs. But my phone was dry. No missed calls. No texts. Nothing. That's when I saw the boot print. Perfect wedge of mud on my driveway. I followed the trail down the sidewalk, and sitting smugly at the end of her pristine brick pathway was Karen, sipping iced tea like she was the suburban godfather. "Lose something?" she chirped. My heart rate doubled. "Karen, did you tow my truck?" She didn't even blink. Technically, the HOA did. Per Covenant 4B. I stepped closer. "You had no right. That's private property. You can't just remove my truck." She tapped her stack of HOA folders. "You left it in violation." I executed the clause for community compliance. That's when I noticed she had a binder labeled Operation Work Truck. She'd named her vendetta. My voice dropped. "Karen, that truck isn't just a vehicle. It's registered with the state as a Class 1 emergency response unit." She blinked. Just once. "Excuse me?" I pulled out my wallet, flipped open my contractor badge, and pointed. Florida State Licensed Emergency Plumber. Category: Health and Safety Certified. Karen tried to laugh, but it came out strangled. "Plumbing isn't an emergency." I leaned in. "Tell that to the people whose homes are flooding at 2 a.m. from a burst sewage line, Karen." She went silent, but her nostrils flared like a bull about to charge. "I'm not afraid of your little badge," she spat. "Well," I replied, "you should be afraid of what happens when you tow a licensed emergency vehicle without notifying the agency that owns it." Her smirk faltered. "I'm sure it's legal," she said, suddenly less confident. I didn't say anything else. I walked back inside and made 3 calls. The first was to my company's legal team. The second was to my friend in the sheriff's department. The third was to the city's emergency response liaison, the guy who coordinates utilities during hurricanes. By noon the next day, Karen's world started cracking. A city official came knocking, clipboard in hand, city seal gleaming in the sunlight. I watched through the blinds as she opened the door in her classic power walk cardigan combo. "Mrs. Cartwright?" the city rep asked. "We need to discuss the unauthorized removal of a certified emergency utility vehicle." She blustered. "It was in violation of—" "Ma'am." The rep cut her off. "You're not law enforcement. You don't have towing authority. You just committed impound fraud." I swear I saw her knees buckle. But the HOA gave me the right," she stammered. "No HOA has the right to supersede emergency ordinances. You disrupted a state-registered utility vehicle that services over 70 homes, 2 hospitals, and 4 schools. Do you understand the liability?" She didn't answer. Instead, she fainted backwards into her hydrangeas. When she came to, the HOA board president, clearly summoned by a very angry phone call, was standing over her with a face like thunder. "Karen, did you seriously tow a state vehicle without board approval?" Karen sat up like a malfunctioning Roomba. "I had the authority under 4B. Karen, we have multiple exceptions on record for utility vehicles, including your neighbor's. His certification has been on file since day 1. You just didn't look." That's when Karen turned pale, paler than skim milk. He never submitted it to me." The board president, a guy named Tom who always looked one bad HOA meeting away from a heart attack, sighed. "Because he submitted it to us. You don't run the HOA, Karen. You run the compliance newsletter." She blinked. "But I'm on the board." "You're a volunteer. You're not a code enforcer." He held up a thick file. "And now, thanks to you, we're getting a letter from the city. And probably a lawsuit." By Friday, my truck was back. Towed in under police escort, lights flashing, HOA members watching through their blinds like it was the Macy's parade. I stepped out onto the lawn, popped the hood, and ran a diagnostic while Karen glared from across the street like the queen of broken dreams. I wasn't done yet. I walked over, slowly, letting each step echo on the pavement like a countdown. "Karen," I said, You have exactly one chance to apologize before this gets worse. She folded her arms. For what? Upholding neighborhood standards. I smiled. No. For impersonating an official, violating a municipal protection statute, and filing a false compliance report, which the board president just voted to retract, by the way. Her mouth opened, then closed. You can't prove I impersonated anyone. I pulled out my phone and hit play. A recording from her call to the towing company echoed in her ears. Yes, I'm with HOA enforcement. This truck is not authorized. Tow immediately. Karen went completely still. I filed the complaint the same day. Impersonation of an officer of the city, interference with emergency infrastructure, and unlawful vehicle seizure. Karen tried to argue it was all a misunderstanding, but the city rep wrote it differently. Malicious misuse of HOA position. She was suspended from the HOA board pending review. The board president, now realizing how deep Karen's antics ran, asked for an audit of all her previous violations. Past citations, fines, and complaints. That's when the real rot started to show. But more on that soon. For now, Karen was off the board, off my case, and most ironically, her Lexus was parked crooked across 2 driveways the very next morning. A citation appeared on her windshield before noon. I didn't put it there. The new compliance officer did. I guess karma comes with reflective tape and legal authority now. 2 weeks passed. The neighborhood felt different, lighter somehow. Karen had gone suspiciously silent. Her curtain peeping reduced to occasional glances instead of full-blown surveillance shifts. I should have known better. Silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Sure enough, a new initiative appeared on every mailbox. A trifold pamphlet printed in grainy grayscale titled, Safe Streets, Safe Homes, the Neighborhood Watch Initiative. At first, it looked harmless. Clip art of a magnifying glass and a padlock, some language about safety and vigilance. But then I read the fine print. Karen had created her own rogue safety board. And get this. She was asking residents to report suspicious vehicles, including those with visible utility modifications. There were even checkboxes for loud engines, ladder racks, and chemical odors. It was a thinly veiled target list for my truck, and anyone else she didn't like. She wanted to backdoor the HOA rules by stirring up fear and posing as a community guardian. But here's where it turned from pathetic to federal. Buried at the bottom of the pamphlet was this line in bold. In partnership with the Department of Homeland Security's Neighborhood Safety Program. That's right. Karen had falsely claimed her off-brand HOA militia was government-sponsored. I don't know if she thought nobody would check or if she believed her own nonsense. But either way, you can't invoke DHS without consequences. I made one call to a friend in code enforcement. He made one call to DHS's local outreach office. And suddenly, Karen had a new guest knocking. One wearing a badge and holding a federal ID. From my porch, I saw it all. Karen opened the door in a turtleneck and pearls like she was hosting a bake sale. The agent didn't even say hello. He simply held up the pamphlet. Did you write this, ma'am? I couldn't hear what she said, but her hands started gesturing wildly, like she was explaining the rules of Monopoly mid-breakdown. The conversation lasted 10 minutes. At one point, Karen stepped outside, likely hoping her stage presence would sway public opinion. Instead, the agent handed her a folder. She opened it, stared, then turned beet red. You see, DHS doesn't take kindly to people falsely claiming affiliation. The folder contained a cease and desist letter, a formal warning, and a notice that she was now under investigation for misrepresentation of federal partnership. I nearly choked on my coffee, but Karen wasn't done humiliating herself. In a panic, she held a neighborhood safety meeting the next day, under her own carport, with folding chairs and a projector from 1998. Only 3 people showed up. One was her friend Helen, who's legally blind and thought it was a bingo night, and the other 2 were new homeowners who left after Karen opened with, "We're forming a civilian patrol." She had even bought orange safety vests with a custom logo, Karen's KARE. Yes, it stood for Keeping Areas Respectfully Enforced. Yes, she wore the vest like a sheriff's badge. No, I am not making that up. The cherry on top, she ordered walkie-talkies. Real ones, with channel numbers, headsets, and emergency codes. She passed one to Helen and began role-playing scenarios like, Code Blue, suspicious gardener van on Hickory Lane. Meanwhile, actual neighbors stood at their windows, filming everything. The videos hit our private Facebook group within hours. Captioned, Karen goes full G.I. Joe over garden hoses. But then, a real issue happened. A gas line ruptured 2 streets over during a remodel. My team and I were dispatched within minutes. We arrived in trucks, gear loaded, masks on. And guess who tried to block us? Karen. Vest on. Arms crossed. Walkie in hand. This area is restricted to neighborhood patrol, she snapped. Where's your clearance? I stared at her. Ma'am, there's a gas leak. Either move or we all go boom. She didn't budge. Until the fire chief's SUV rolled up, lights flashing. He stepped out, squinted at her vest, and asked, Who the hell are you supposed to be, FEMA Barbie? The chief escorted Karen off the property. She kept pointing at our trucks, yelling, That one doesn't have an HOA permit. The firefighters laughed so hard one of them dropped a wrench. The city filed an obstruction report. And later that night, the HOA president sent out an official email. Due to recent events involving impersonation of federal partnerships and obstruction of emergency services, Karen Cartwright is permanently barred from launching any safety-related initiatives under HOA branding. Translation: no more fake pamphlets, no more patrol cosplay, and definitely no more walkie-talkies. Karen tried to play the victim after that. Posted a 700-word rant in Comic Sans on Nextdoor about community betrayal. He got 2 likes. One from Helen. One from a spam bot selling fake Ray-Bans. And as for her KRE gear, the vests, the signs, the yard banners, all boxed up and dumped on her curb 2 days later. One had a handwritten note taped to it. Karen, this ain't Gotham. Stop pretending you're Batman. But the real twist was what the investigation uncovered. A paper trail that didn't just disprove her DHS lie. It also exposed some serious skeletons. Skeletons we'll dig up in the next chapter, when her finances, her fake fines, and her secret HOA scheme come crashing down. Let's just say the Queen of Petty was living off more than just HOA fees, and someone was about to flip on her. After Karen's DHS debacle and walkie-talkie patrol meltdown, things went eerily quiet. No new citations. No homemade flyers. Not even a passive-aggressive Facebook post. But behind the scenes, the HOA board was cooking something serious. The city's legal department had flagged her name for repeated nuisance filings and misrepresentation of authority. That triggered a review of all activity she'd initiated over the past 12 months. And what they found peeled the entire facade off Karen's papier-mâché empire. Turns out, her obsession with fines wasn't just about enforcing decorum. It was about profit. Karen had been acting as a one-woman fine factory. She issued over 70 compliance citations to residents, mostly newcomers or retirees, ranging from $25 for garden gnome overcrowding to $150 for non-approved Halloween inflatables. The board had assumed these fines were being processed normally, but when they followed the paper trail, they noticed something off. The fine amounts didn't match HOA accounting. Worse, many of the checks had been mailed directly to a P.O. box registered in Karen's maiden name. Not to the HOA office. Not to the property management firm. Straight to her little suburban treasury. That's when the HOA president, Tom, called an emergency meeting. And for the first time ever, it wasn't hosted in Karen's freshly scented living room with lemon bars on the table. Tom laid it out bluntly. Karen has been collecting unauthorized fees, issuing illegitimate fines, and rerouting HOA funds through a P.O. box in Jensen Beach. There was an audible gasp. Helen coughed into her purse. One member muttered, "So the Santa inflatable wasn't actually against the rules?" Tom rubbed his temples. "There is no Santa rule. Karen made it up." They voted unanimously to launch a full HOA audit, and within 48 hours, the property management company terminated her gate code access, email privileges, and any remaining volunteer roles. But the real punch came when one resident, a quiet widow named Mrs. Abernathy, stepped forward with receipts. She'd kept every notice, every photocopy, every Karen fee she'd ever paid, totaling over $1,800 across 2 years. And she wasn't alone. A flood of residents came forward, all with similar stories. Threatened with liens, harassed about mulch colors, bullied into writing checks. Tom compiled the data and sent it to the HOA attorney. Within a week, Karen was served. Fraudulent collection of HOA dues, mail fraud, unauthorized representation. And that's when the house of cards really collapsed. Karen tried to defend herself. She called it a community donation program, said the money was going toward beautification efforts. But the HOA's landscaping contractor, who'd never been paid a dime, refuted that within minutes. She never once approved a project. She told me the HOA didn't have funds. So where did all the money go? Easy. Her backyard spa, her 3rd bathroom remodel, and best of all, her custom-built catio. Yes, Karen had used fake HOA fines to fund a screened-in outdoor cat lounge with multi-level scratching posts and a waterfall. The receipts were there. So was the contractor's signed invoice. Design and install luxury feline terrace. Paid in full by K. Cartwright. Word spread fast. One teenager on our street printed flyers that said, Karen's HOA fines equals spa time for Fluffy, and stapled them to every lamppost. The video of Karen being served went semi-viral. My favorite part? When she tried to slam the door and the process server wedged it open with his foot, saying, "Ma'am, you need to sign for this. It's about your cat patio." The HOA filed a civil suit to recover funds. Multiple residents joined in. But things escalated when one angry homeowner reported the fraud to the state attorney general's office. That's when Karen got hit with the big one. Mail fraud across state lines, because several victims were snowbirds who mailed checks from out of state. That turned it into a federal case. Within 2 weeks, her accounts were frozen. The spa shut down. The catio contractor filed a lien. And Karen? She showed up at the HOA office with a handwritten letter of resignation and a request to keep things private for the good of the neighborhood. She even brought muffins. Tom read the letter out loud during the next board meeting. Then he stapled it to the community bulletin with a big red, denied, stamp and announced, "Transparency is good for the neighborhood." The crowd erupted in applause. A few people brought inflatable Santas just to celebrate. Karen's reputation was dust. Her Lexus sat in the driveway unmoved for days. Neighbors reported seeing her watching from the blinds, mascara smudged, hair unbrushed. But there was one last detail that turned poetic into legendary. Turns out, Karen had installed a security camera on her catio, probably to guard Fluffy's hot tub from raccoons. But she never deleted the footage. And on one video, time-stamped and watermarked, you could clearly see Karen writing fake violation slips at her patio table, cackling to herself like a cartoon villain. Guess who subpoenaed that footage? Yep, the HOA attorney. Guess who got slapped with a settlement demand backed by video evidence? Karen. In the end, she had to pay back $18,243.17 in misappropriated fines, and publicly resign from the HOA with a notarized apology posted on the HOA bulletin board for 90 consecutive days. And what happened to the catio? HOA rules now state, no structure may be built for non-human residents using funds acquired through fraudulent fines. We call it the Fluffy Clause. By the time the HOA fines were repaid and Fluffy's spa closed for good, I figured Karen would finally retreat into peaceful obscurity. Maybe become a silent neighbor, do yoga, try gardening therapy. But no, her next move was a lawsuit. I got served while I was elbow-deep in a tankless water heater. A courier handed me the manila envelope, smiled awkwardly, and said, "Yeah, this one's got drama written all over it." Inside was a civil complaint for emotional distress, reputational damage, and hostile neighborhood behavior, filed by Karen Cartwright. Against me. She claimed I had maliciously weaponized legal bureaucracy and humiliated her through aggressive, performative plumbing. Her words, not mine. The best part? She submitted a photo of my work truck, parked neatly in my driveway, and cited the phrase Florida's #1 emergency plumber as provocative marketing designed to incite inferiority complexes in neighbors. My lawyer nearly fell out of his chair laughing. "This reads like a soap opera script," he said. "I've defended people from arson claims that were more grounded in reality. But we played it smart, filed a motion to dismiss, and then we countered. See, the thing about filing a lawsuit is you open yourself to discovery. And when Karen brought this circus into court, she invited us to dig. Emails, financials, browser histories, we had the legal green light to explore it all. We started with her communications. That's when it got spicy. Turns out, Karen had been running a secret business from her home. A shady little wellness boutique called Tranquility Haven. Sound innocent? It wasn't. She was selling unlicensed herbal remedies and dubious CBD teas, some promising to reverse the effects of aging and enhance psychic clarity. None of them FDA approved. All of them shipped nationwide from her garage. We discovered multiple online storefronts using aliases KC Wellness, Cartwright Botanicals, and my personal favorite, Nature's Karen, the cherry on top. She was using the HOA email list to market her products, spamming neighbors with discount codes like Cure 10 for 10% off Tranquil Mind tinctures. She'd even sent a sample tea bag to one of the HOA board members. He thought it was a roof cleaner and dumped it on his shingles. But here's where it gets legally catastrophic. Karen had never filed a home business permit. She had no resale license, no health inspections, no insurance. And thanks to her lawsuit, that little secret was now part of a public court record. My lawyer smiled like a man who'd just discovered gold under his lawn. She wanted a fight. She just handed us a wrecking ball. We filed a motion for full financial disclosure. Her attorney balked. "That's outside the scope," he argued. The judge disagreed. "You open the door, Ms. Cartwright. They're allowed to walk through it." When the court saw how she'd been profiting off of illegal sales and manipulating HOA authority to market her cures, it was game over. The judge dismissed her emotional distress claim as frivolous and retaliatory, and referred the matter to the local zoning board and the state health department. Suddenly, Karen wasn't suing me anymore. The county was investigating her. Code enforcement showed up 2 days later. Not just one guy in khakis, a whole squad. Clipboards, gloves, a hazmat inspection kit. They walked through her garage and came out with boxes of dusty jars, moldy herbs, mislabeled droppers, and a batch of expired Focus Elixir tea packets that smelled like expired foot cream. The county health inspector gave a statement. "This isn't alternative medicine. This is a liability cocktail." Karen was issued 3 citations: operating an unlicensed food processing facility, unregistered business sales, and improper storage of consumables. Her garage was locked and sealed with yellow tape. One of the inspectors wrote, "Biohazard, do not enter," across the tea shelf. But it gets better. The HOA, already burned by her fine fraud scandal, held an emergency vote and passed the Cartwright Clause. No resident may operate a business involving ingestible products on HOA property without triple-level licensing and monthly compliance reporting. Karen's name is literally etched into the clause header. You know how most people leave a legacy with a tree or a plaque? Karen left hers through fermented mushroom dust and weaponized chamomile. Publicly humiliated again, she tried to spin the narrative. Posted a 6-paragraph apology on Facebook saying she was just trying to bring natural healing to the community. No one bought it. The comments were brutal. "Next time, just bake cookies, Karen. Selling vibes isn't the same as selling FDA violations. Does Fluffy need a lawyer too? The best part?" One of my texts made a meme with her Tranquility Haven logo slapped onto a picture of the hazmat crew and captioned it, "Calm your nerves, then call poison control." Her lawsuit didn't just backfire, it detonated everything. She was fined, investigated, shamed, and banned from running any home-based business again unless it passed quarterly inspections. Karen now had nothing left but her blinds, her decals, and a growing collection of cease and desist letters from various government agencies. But even in defeat, she wasn't done. She had one last move, a desperate one. She tried to call in a personal favor from her cousin on the county beautification board to have me cited for unsightly hose placement. That's when I finally got tired of playing defense. The next move would be mine. After the tea-scented lawsuit disaster, Karen vanished from public view like a failed magician after a bad card trick. But 1 week later, a county vehicle rolled up to my driveway and issued a notice. Reason: improper hose visibility. That's right. I got fined for how my garden hose was coiled. Apparently, I had violated County Code 14.9b. Non-permanent utility equipment must not obstruct visual harmony of the property line. Never mind that the hose was green, coiled, and hung neatly on a rack. Never mind that half the neighborhood had similar setups. I knew this wasn't a real inspection. It was a favor, so I did a little digging. Karen had mentioned her cousin once. During a community potluck 2 years back, before she went full HOA tyrant, she bragged about a relative on the county beautification board. "If I need a code reinterpreted," she'd said, sipping Chardonnay, "I know who to call." At the time, it seemed like garden variety name-dropping. Now, it reeked of petty political nepotism. I cross-referenced the inspector's name, Randy Blythe, with county employee records. Boom. Direct hire under Jessica Whitmore, a senior board member. Maiden name? Cartwright, Karen's first cousin. I filed a public records request for inspections made in our neighborhood over the past year. What I found made my jaw drop. My property had been randomly inspected 4 times, more than any other house in the subdivision. The next highest? A neighbor who refused to sign Karen's neighborhood watch petition. Pattern was forming. I took it to Tom, the HOA president. "You've got to be kidding me," he said, flipping through the paperwork. "This is straight-up misuse of county enforcement." I nodded. "It's bigger than fake fines and herbal tea. She's been weaponizing public offices to enforce her personal grudges." Tom called an emergency board meeting again. This one was bigger. Residents packed into the rec center, murmuring, eyes wide. I printed out all the records and handed them to the committee. Tom stood at the podium. "Today, we're addressing not a violation, but a pattern. A history of Karen Cartwright leveraging her personal connections to influence local inspections for personal vendettas." Karen, red-faced and jittery in the second row, shot up. "This is a smear campaign. You're letting a plumber dictate our governance." I stood slowly. "No, Karen. I'm letting public records and documented corruption dictate your consequences." I brought out one last bombshell. A recorded voicemail left on a neighbor's answering machine. Karen's voice, clear as day. "Just tell the inspector it's overgrown weeds. I'll send Randy next week to make it official." The room went silent. You could hear the smell of defeat wafting off her cardigan. Tom turned to the HOA attorney. "Can we file for a permanent ban from all HOA leadership roles?" The attorney nodded. "With this level of evidence, not only can you ban her, we can also submit formal complaints to the county ethics board." Karen stormed out, slamming the rec center door so hard the folding chairs rattled. But the drama wasn't done. A week later, Jessica Whitmore, Karen's cousin, was placed on administrative leave pending a formal review of misconduct. The county issued a statement clarifying the independence of its inspection process and condemning misuse of authority by individuals with personal relationships to local residents. Randy Blythe, the inspector who cited my hose, quietly resigned. The county dropped the violation. But the neighborhood? We didn't forget. Karen had once ruled like a suburban dictator. Now, she couldn't walk her cat without someone fake coughing, "Code violation," behind her. Then came the vote. The HOA board drafted and passed what we now call the Cartwright Addendum, a constitutional amendment to the bylaws. It bans any HOA member from holding voting or enforcement power if they've been proven to misuse public institutions for private retaliation. And they attached it to every future leadership election permanently. At the next HOA meeting, Karen showed up to protest. She brought cookies. She brought a binder. She brought Helen. But nobody even let her speak. Tom read the amendment, declared it passed, and then offered her a chair as a guest. Poetic justice, seat by seat. Karen hasn't recovered. Her once-weekly newsletters have dried up. The custom HOA stationery she printed, now used by neighbors to line their bird cages. Her Lexus was seen at the local library, where she now spends her time researching her legal options, according to Helen. But word on the street? She's preparing one last move, a sneaky attempt to rewrite her legacy. And it involves the annual HOA election. That's where we'll finish her story. Karen spent the next few months lurking like a suburban cryptid, rare sightings mostly at dusk, often near the HOA bulletin board. Rumors swirled. Some said she was working on a memoir, My Truth, silenced by standards. Others claimed she was building a secret ballot campaign to rejoin the board under a different name. But the truth? She was planning a technical comeback. You see, while the Cartwright Addendum banned her from holding enforcement power, it didn't explicitly prohibit running for a ceremonial, non-voting board position. And Karen, in a move so predictably petty it almost deserved applause, filed her candidacy paperwork under K.L. Cartwright. New format. Same tyranny. The announcement hit the community email like a bomb. Karen's back? One neighbor posted in the group chat. Wasn't she banned? Someone else replied. Technically, no. Just restricted. And Karen knew it. Her campaign kicked off with eerie optimism. Pastel flyers on mailboxes. Slogans like, Restore Order, Respect Tradition. She even rebranded her previous disasters as learning experiences. She claimed the fines she issued were poorly documented, but always well-intentioned. The illegal tea business? A misunderstood passion project. And the nepotism? A tragic miscommunication between family members. Honestly, it was almost artful, the way she polished garbage and handed it out as composted wisdom. Still, people laughed. A lot. Someone made a parody campaign poster. Karen's face photoshopped onto a neighborhood watch sign, holding a walkie-talkie and a mug that said, World's Okayest Tyrant. But Karen pushed forward. She booked the rec center for a Meet the Candidate night. She brought lemon bars. She wore a sash that read, Hope, Honesty, HOA. About a dozen people showed up, half for the snacks, half for the spectacle. I showed up for one reason only, to make sure she didn't slip through a loophole. I brought a binder. Not of complaints, but of her own past violations, printed, laminated, and tabbed with color-coded examples. When she finished her speech, which included the phrase regrettable enforcement misfires at least twice, I raised my hand. Karen, do you still stand by the citation you issued to Mrs. Abernathy for having overly reflective wind chimes? The room snorted. Karen straightened. That citation was a matter of property tone management. I flipped to tab 3. And the photo of your cat in a lawn chair on the catio, surrounded by gnome heads and solar fairy lights, that wasn't a violation of tone? Her smile faltered. That was decorative serenity. I grinned. Page 19 of the Cartwright Addendum says any former board member found to have enforced contradictory decor standards for personal exemption is disqualified from holding office, even ceremonial. The room froze. Tom, the board president, raised an eyebrow. That's true. You wrote that clause into the draft yourself, Karen. You even color-coded it. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. But I never enforced it against myself, she barked. That's not the spirit of the rule. I leaned forward. It's the letter of it. And we all know how much you love letters. Tom nodded slowly. Effective immediately, Karen Cartwright, also known as K.L. Cartwright, is ineligible for candidacy. A polite golf clap broke out. Helen dropped her lemon bar. The next morning, the bulletin board bore a final notice. Official announcement. Karen Cartwright is hereby disqualified from all current and future HOA board roles, including ceremonial or advisory positions. This decision is final. Signed, the board and most of the block. Karen was officially done. Her campaign signs were pulled down. Some turned into origami swans and left on her lawn. A few residents taped thank you notes to my mailbox. One of them folded around a Starbucks gift card. And as for Fluffy, rumor has it she now prefers the windowsill, where there's less drama and more sun. The final nail in Karen's social coffin came quietly. The HOA hired a professional mediator to help rebuild community trust. In the first session, neighbors shared stories of the weirdest fines Karen had ever issued. She once wrote me up for having 2 flags on my porch during Memorial Day, someone said. She fined me for excessively cheerful lighting in December, said another. We laughed, not out of cruelty, but relief. The rain was over. Sanity had returned. Karen still lives in the neighborhood, but now she keeps her head down, her blinds closed, and her cat inside. She walks early in the morning and avoids eye contact. And every time someone passes her on the sidewalk, they nod politely and say, "Nice hose."